So this is something that I've talked about a lot in a lot of the lives, but I know the lives that I just pop on. Sometimes you make it, sometimes you can't. We're going to store this training right here in the Facebook group, okay? So I've studied a lot of multimillionaires. I've read a lot of books. I've spent a lot of time with them. I've mentored one-on-one, kneecap to kneecap with a lot of them. We're going to stage this in here. Wealth is simple. If you want to accomplish anything in life, you've got to break it down to this simple. And if you've met anybody that overcomplicates things, they don't really understand it. So I'm going to break this stuff down to you very simply and help you get to financial freedom. So there's 3 steps. 3 steps to financial freedom. So number 1, you've got to pay yourself first. This is a foundational principle of financial success, of you getting to financial freedom. You've got to master the habit of prioritizing you above everything else. So typically, and how I was raised, is my mom and dad, when they got paid, it was the 1st and the 15th. Well, as soon as the paycheck came in on the 1st, that money was gone by like the 3rd, right? You got to pay your rent, you got to pay the grocery bill, the electricity, the utilities, the whole thing. By like the 3rd through the 6th, that money's gone. You've got to stretch that for like 12 to 9 days to make sure that you can make it to the 15th. You got to stretch the groceries, you got to stretch all of that. So what happens is we pay all of these bills, and at the end of all that bill cycle, when all the money's run out, then we're left at the bottom of that. The problem with that formula is you never save and invest for yourself. This is why pay yourself first is a foundational principle for you to get financial freedom. You have to prioritize you above all else. Now, we're going to talk in later trainings about where do you put the money. For you right now, if you have not practiced this habit, start doing it. Just throw it in your savings account at the bank. The rate of return, the interest rate that you're not earning, it doesn't matter right now. The habit of paying yourself first, established early in life, no matter where you are, there you are. Establish that habit now. Get good at it. Pay yourself first. Because what happens is if you pay yourself last, then you run into the old problem of there's too much month at the end of the money. Because that's what happened with my parents. They got paid on the 1st, the money's gone. By the 15th, that money's gone. Like the 25th, they're out of money. They're waiting for the 31st to come so when the 1st hits, they can get paid. This is how you solve that problem. And I also want you to know that budgeting, although a little controversial, budgeting doesn't work. Budgeting can't work because it works until it doesn't work. And I studied civil engineering. I went to college at Texas A&M Kingsville, which is on the coast of Texas. If you know anything about the coast, there's like Corpus Christi. Anyway, the whole thing. So in engineering, you have a principle called redundancy. If you've ever got in an airplane and you've seen in an airplane, it says no smoking, like when you get on the plane. But redundancy is what happens if somebody smokes on an airplane. That's why when you go into the bathroom, there's an ashtray, like to put your cigarette out. Because redundancy is we've got to prevent a fire. So if somebody comes on the airplane, even though it says no smoking everywhere, smoking is a federal crime to smoke on an airplane. Even if it were to happen, redundancy, a system that improves when people test it, that's a true system. Like an immune system, when it's tested, it gets better. A system, when tested, is a true system if it continues to improve. Redundancy is if somebody's on the airplane smoking, they have a place to put it out. Because the next problem is somebody does have a cigarette, where do I put it out? Well, budgeting doesn't work because it doesn't work for everybody. It works until it's broken. It works until it doesn't work anymore, which means budgeting doesn't work. Now, I know people personally that they budget, they're disciplined, they follow the system, they do whatever they've got to do to budget their money. I know all of my money goes here. I've budgeted my grocery money and it always works out. However, for those, the rest of us normal people, budgeting doesn't work. How many of you know what I'm talking about? The answer to budgeting doesn't work, and the reason that you don't really have to budget, I mean, you do and you don't, right? We're not going to go too deep into that. This is the answer. If you pay yourself first, you don't have to worry about budgeting because you've already done step 1, which is pay yourself first. You prioritize you over everything else. Why are you working if you're not going to pay you and your family, or you're a future version of you? Sometime in the future, throw money to that version of you. You know, the 65-year-old version of you. Send some money to that person. Pay yourself first. Make sense? So that's principle number 1 of the 3 steps. Number 2, we've talked about this. You've heard me rant and rave about this. This is your legal right as a United States citizen to reduce your taxes to the legal minimum. Why on earth are you going to work your butt off, make some money, and then give a bunch of it up if you don't have to? And the example that I equate that to is that if you're driving down the road and you're doing 45 miles an hour, say my man David and I are driving down the road, And David's in Utah and I'm in Texas. In Texas, we get places fast. We got stuff to do, in case you couldn't tell. In Utah, they're a little more relaxed, a little more laid back, checking out the mountains, the scenery. In Texas, we don't have any of that. We just drive. So I nudged David. I said, David, you're doing 45 miles an hour. The speed limit up there is 65. Will you mind stepping on it, brother? We got places to be, people to see, and things to do. He says, my bad, man. I didn't see it was 65. Let me speed up. In that moment, when David goes from 45 miles an hour to 65 miles an hour, did he break any rules? No, David didn't break any rules. He's just speeding up to the speed limit. He gets to 64, slows down, stops at 65, and he just keeps on rolling down the road at 65 miles an hour. There's nothing wrong with that. Reducing your taxes to the legal minimum is the exact same thing. It's getting to a destination more efficiently and faster by not giving up so much of the money that you don't have to give up. It's understanding this. Now, this has gone to the United States Supreme Court. Now, you've probably seen me talk about this before, but to stage it here in this group so you can come back to it anytime, I'm going to read this quote to you. And it says right here, the legal right of a taxpayer to decrease the amount of what otherwise would be his taxes or to altogether avoid them by means which the law permits cannot be doubted. Who said that? The United States Supreme Court. Let me get out of the way. The United States Supreme Court, Gregory versus Halvorin, 293 U.S. 465. You can Google that. You can look it up. That is a Supreme Court ruling. By means which the law permits, you, as a United States citizen, have the legal right to reduce your taxes to the legal minimum. That's why it's principle number 2. This is something that most people overlook. But if you're overpaying your taxes, I don't know, between $1,000 to $5,000 a year, times the number of years that you've worked, let's say from age 16, I don't know, to age 60, from all of those years, however you're at in that train, however many years you've worked, times $1,000, times $2,000, if you're overpaying that, how much money are you overpaying in taxes? Because the United States Supreme Court has ruled and says that by law, you have the right to reduce the taxes. And if you keep more of what you earn, you can get to financial freedom faster. The key is understanding how to do that. We're going to get into that in more training, but I just want you to understand the overall concept. Concept number 1 is pay yourself first. Concept number 2 is keep more of what you earn and reduce your taxes to the legal minimum. Now, number 3. Number 3, you've got to understand that you've got to control your income. If you don't control your income, then you're not getting paid what you're worth. Mathematically, it is impossible for you to get paid what you're worth as an employee. Because, think about this. What is the greatest expense to an employer? Unless it's an anomaly, like they've got a ton of inventory, the greatest overhead inside of a company is the payroll, is the people that they employ inside of their business, from the cash that they pay them and the benefits that they give out through like health insurance and things like that. So if the greatest expense is payroll, and we can prove this by anytime there's a market downturn or an industry downturn, what is the first thing that they cut? I talked to somebody today. Their numbers, they didn't get cut through the pandemic, from March of last year to present day. They didn't get cut. But just recently they did get cut. They got laid off because their numbers weren't reported. The numbers that were reported weren't as good. They weren't an improvement over last year. So because they didn't make enough money, there's 2 ways to get rich. You increase income, you reduce spending, you save and invest the difference, right? So income, expenses, you save and invest the difference, right? Well, because through the pandemic, their income didn't climb and their expenses were the same, the shareholders said, well, let's just reduce our expenses. So if we reduce our expenses, then we can show a bigger profit. If we can show a bigger profit, the shareholders are happy. What? What kind of garbage is this? Well, those people got cut. They got laid off. Because this person that I talked to was in that group, making a good salary, they were one of the first ones to go because you can maximize your return on the cut. Like, that's the first thing that happens in a downturn, is you cut employees because it's the biggest rate of return that you can get to report to shareholders, make the shareholders happy. Go, oh, because then it's a paper. On paper, it looks like the rate of return went up. It's not. It's all smoke and mirrors. Look at General Electric and what Jack Welch did. All smoke and mirrors. So, anyway, you've got to understand that you're never going to get paid what you're worth as an employee. And I just kind of explained that example, but I also want it from a different angle. I want you to think about this. anytime you're going to get work done on your house or something, like I say I was going to have somebody come redo the roof or, whatever, and I'm going to get a bunch of roofers to come out and give me quotes. If everything else is equal, if the quality's the same, if the reviews are the same, if the quality of the work, the quality of the materials, the experience, whatever, all the stuff that you measure, if everything else is equal, what am I making my decision on? Price. Which one are you going to hire? If everything else is equal, if everything else is equal, are you going to pick the lowest price or the highest price? If everything else is equal, now I'm not talking low bid government contracts, right? Where is it going to work? I'm saying if everything else is equal, well, then you pick based on price. And you do that in your own life. So you understand that you've got to control your income, because if somebody else dictates the income to you, you don't get paid what you're worth. But I want you to understand this concept. And this is something that I'm going to dive deep in on many, many different other trainings inside of this group. Money follows value. And there's different ways that you can show the value that you have to the world, to the marketplace. When you show your value to the world, money will follow behind it. Money flows behind value. Value precedes money always. When? Always. So when you show value to the world, you know that money's right behind it. That is the secret to controlling your income. Now, I'm not giving you a whole lot on this. I understand that. We're talking high-level concepts. This is the high-level concept that I want you to understand. This is the concept that I talk to my children about. How can you provide value into the world? How can you provide value to other people? That is capitalism. That is free enterprise. That is the free to choose marketplace that we have. When you precede with value, money follows it. Make sense? So this is just the high level concepts I wanted to place in here. This is stuff that I could talk about in depth and in detail on some of the lives, but I wanted to put it inside of this group so it's staged here, it's recorded. You can come back, you can rewind, you can watch it as many times as you want. But the 3 steps, just to kind of recap, the 3 steps to financial freedom. The 3 steps to financial freedom. Number 1, you got to pay yourself first. That is a foundational principle. You can't violate that law. Thou shalt always pay thyself first. Always, always, always. Okay. Number 2, reduce your taxes to the legal minimum. We talked about that. The United States Supreme Court has ruled that is your legal right. That is your American duty. Come on, be a good American. Reduce your taxes to the legal minimum. Make them do the same job on less money, right? They're working for us. And so number 3, which leads us perfectly into control your income. If you want to get paid what you're worth, you have to control your income. I'm going to give you many different examples of that from many different angles and many different industries. We're going to talk about that inside of this Facebook group. But for now, those are the 3 steps to financial freedom. Take good notes. You feel free to use the comments below to type your notes to retain this information. The key is not for me to speak, but for you to learn. I just happen to be the guy talking and make the loudest noise. So I hope you learned something from this. Hope you find value in this, and I will see you again soon. Take care, everybody.